From the mind of David Lynch comes a modern-day masterpiece, so startling, so provocative, so mysterious, that it will open your eyes to a world you have never seen before.
Hey, neighbor. Here I come. You got about 1 second to live, bud.
Okay, welcome to Movie Night Extravaganza. Tonight we're going to be discussing David Lynch's Blue Velvet, which is a movie that I always intended to watch, but I think this is the first time I've watched it in full. But anyway, introducing the panel, I'm here as always with Jay Andrew World.
I can walk like a chicken. I'm good.
All right, Kristina Oakes. I'm Kristina on Twitch.
Yes, my lounge singer arc has been confirmed. Though I'm not going to sing.
Once again, joined by Rayyvana, Reactions on the TYT Twitch.
Kristina came here just to flex on me. I'm not in my lounge singer arc.
And of course, the great Ana Kasparian, the executive producer and host of TYT's main show and Weekends at Jacobin. All right, how's it going, everybody? Strange movie. And any first impressions, I guess, starting there.
I'll jump in. I'll take the bullet because I feel like I might be the only one who thinks this about the movie. I saw it for the first time last night, and I hated it. And everyone loves Blue Velvet. So I watched the movie, and then afterwards, I read a bunch of reviews about it. And it also kind of it left me a little bit confused. So I wanted to understand more about it. And it's considered one of the greatest American films of all time. So I just want to get that out of the way because I'm apparently an outlier in not enjoying it. For me, it was just reading about it and understanding what Lynch's objective was in putting that film out. I think the idea was good. The execution wasn't great. I was confused most of the time. I think part of the confusion was the fact that Kyle MacLachlan is awful in it. I think his acting is terrible, and I can't really tell what he's trying to get across the screen in the way that he's acting in this role. You get what I'm saying? So a lot of times I was like, wait, but is he actually into Sandy Williams? And Sandy Williams is played by Laura Dern in it. I thought the acting was bad. I don't think that it actually executed the objective that Lynch had with putting this movie out. But with that said, given the fact that it was released in 1986, yeah, it was like groundbreaking. Like, think about how conservative the culture was back then, especially given everything that was taking place with, the AIDS epidemic and all of that. So I get and respect that aspect of it. I just I didn't get the objective until I read about it later. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we recently did Showgirls, and it's kind of a similar thing in some ways. Like, Showgirls was kind of which came out a year after Blue Velvet did. A few years after. I guess it was the 90s. I was thinking, for some reason I was thinking it was 87. It wasn't. It was RoboCop. It was
95.
But yeah, it was 95. So it's a few years later, but still like a similar thing that, at the time, I think that the movies were so like I don't like it was incredibly controversial and had like sex as a main topic and had characters that you don't normally expect. And then watching it now on this side of that time frame, I guess there's so many things that are so much worse than both of these movies that have come out. So it doesn't really feel like watching it on that side of it that you're watching something groundbreaking.
I actually fully agree with Anna on everything except for that I loved the movie. I loved the movie a lot, but there is like you wonder while you're watching, like, what is Jeffrey's motivation? Like,
right.
And I think it does have a lot to do with Kyle MacLachlan being very much a Boy Scout. And it's like I'm struggling to get from you that you are like being enticed into this seedy underbelly of Lumberton. Like your motivation is like eluding me, but I think I actually enjoyed that. And I don't know if it was intentional or if it's just like, Kyle MacLachlan and me just constantly seeing him as Agent Dale Cooper and nothing else. But like,
well, I kind of addressed this
that.
before. I'm sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I kind of addressed this before in the Scott Pilgrim episode where I was mentioning how Scott Pilgrim was kind of like a blank slate we could put ourselves onto. And I think Kyle MacLachlan in this movie is much the same way. Scott McCloud in Understanding Comics discussed how like a cartoon is made simplified enough where we can place ourselves into it. And in a way, Kyle MacLachlan's kind of sterile performance, reminiscent of like Keanu Reeves or what's her name who played Katniss Everdeen? Like
Jennifer Lawrence.
They're kind of Jennifer Lawrence. Yeah, they're like this everyman or every woman or every person that we can all kind of relate to and put ourselves into it because they are vague enough as a human that we can relate to it that way. If that makes any sense.
Well, and I'd also say that I think David Lynch is putting kind of himself into Kyle MacLachlan throughout this movie because there's this weird voyeuristic element to it, right? He's like, because he's trying to solve, he's like kind of wants to be a detective, it feels like, but then he's also like, falls in love with Isabella Rossellini's, her like lounge singer character. Dorothy, he falls like, or, gets attracted to her, maybe not falls in love, but is like hiding in her closet, watching her get undressed. And then there's that, that sex scene where she kind of, puts her own trauma almost, or tries to, throughout that with the knife, like into him and gets him into this, hooks him into this underbelly of sadomasochistic, Lumberton. But I think that, David Lynch is kind of putting himself into that character as well. And as a director, we're not quite sure what he's trying to do with it either. So it's interesting that I think that there's a big parallel there.
And I don't think David Lynch knows what he's trying to do with it either, because I remember hearing a story Neil Gaiman was going to be writing a movie with David Lynch, which sounds amazing. And apparently at the end of the movie, he gets his phone call, and David Lynch is like, I thought of the end of the movie. The main character walks around his house and picks up an object and stares at it for a moment, puts it down, and then picks up another object and stares at it a moment, puts it down, and then picks up another object and stares at it a moment, puts it down. And then we reveal his house is on the moon. And Neil Gaiman hung up the phone and said, I will never work with David Lynch.
A lot of David Lynch's ideas feel like high person ideas. Like he just sits there and he's like, hey, what? I have this idea. And then like the worst
way
people
too ahead of his time.
Some of the worst hipsters that I know will be like, I totally get it. I'm like, no, you don't. No,
totally.
I mean, like
as I was watching it, sorry to interrupt you, but I just have to get this one point across. As I was watching it, I was like, this is the exact movie that hipsters love to talk about and how they get it. And it's like a super obnoxious point because like no one gets it until, you read about like what the objective of the film was, like what were the thoughts. And I get that film is like art, right? It's a lot of it is up for interpretation. You make what you want to make of it. But the movie's point was actually really interesting, right? So just juxtaposing light and darkness, evil and good. And I think that could have been executed a little bit better. I'm just not 100% sure how. I felt like throughout the entire movie, I was just confused. I knew that there was like a lot of symbolism going along, but I didn't really understand what that symbolism meant or was supposed to mean. That's
which kind of fails at the point of symbolism if you don't if it's not coming across to you. Like there's no point in having symbolism and then like the audience is like, well, I don't really get, all right, like it's symbolizing something, but you know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Like,
I liked it. I don't feel it particularly strongly about it, which is another parallel between this and Showgirls, where it feels like everybody either really, really likes this movie, or like I guess I mean I think the people that dislike this movie, or at least admit that they don't like this movie, is a very small margin in comparison. But I think that I didn't really feel particularly strongly either way. I liked it, I guess, more than I disliked it, but it's kind of the same way I feel about Kyle MacLachlan and everything. Like I'm never like, this is a performance that blew me away, which is once again a parallel to Showgirls.
So the question is, Kristina, do you really, really love it, or do you really, really hate it?
I loved Isabella Rossellini. Like, this was her first like serious work, because she had been like a model and did like cosmetic campaigns for most of her career. And even though this film's quite controversial because the stuff that she had to do, she was born a controversy. She's the daughter of Ingrid Bergman and Roberto Rossellini. Her parents were having an affair while they were working on a film, and Ingrid Bergman was essentially canceled for having an affair and had to like move to Italy for like a decade. And so,
Wow.
yeah, so there's a whole there's a YouTube channel called Be Kind Rewind, which looks into Ingrid Bergman's like cancellation in Hollywood. So Isabella's probably thinking, you know what? I was born in controversy. I'm going to stay a controversy.
Well, I mean, you know, the reaction to her in this movie specifically was incredibly like violent. Like, people kind of shunned her. There's a story about her in the elevator with Katharine Hepburn, and Katharine Hepburn like kind of goes, "Oh, you're Ingrid Bergman's daughter," and she's like, "Yeah," and then she just walked out of the elevator as soon as she could, like got off on a different floor. So it's like, you know, I think that it's a tough thing, because I don't think that she was ready for that level of that rejection for this movie, because it all centered on her. Nobody was really centering on David Lynch, because nobody was expecting anything different from David Lynch.
And her mother also did a lot of like noir films, and also was one of the earlier Hitchcock girls as well. So like, she's like almost doing films that sort of resembled some of the things that her mother was doing like 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, the thing that I actually really liked about the film was the style reminded me a lot of Hitchcock, and I love Hitchcock films. So stylistically speaking, I enjoyed that. But again, it was like too much symbolism and stuff that like was never really explained, right? So
the dream logic.
Welcome to David Lynch films.
Yeah, no, I know. Like the weird like breathing mask thing. Like, what was that? Like,
I actually
like
have
laughing gas, right?
I have a clip where you know, Dennis Hopper actually talks about it. So
that
might be a good time to bring this into it. This is, I mean, the story of how he got involved in his role with it's actually really interesting, and I think this is the clip where he goes into it quite a bit. But he kind of had been rejected because it was like by Hollywood in general, because he was such an addict by this point that, you know, it was just like kind of impossible to work with him. Like, you can kind of even see it in like, you know, like Apocalypse Now, like, you know, that level of stuff. So his reputation had been completely ruined by his addiction, and he kind of lobbied David Lynch to let him be in this movie, because he felt like this role as Frank was something that he, as an addict, like or a former addict, like really, I guess, related to.
There were a group of us that went, wow, if you take drugs and you drink and you want to be an artist, it's okay, because that's what artists do, you know? Van Gogh said, hey, I drank for a whole summer to find that yellow. He probably couldn't find the tube, you know what I mean? But it's not necessary to be an artist and to derange your senses like that, you know? Meryl Streep is not a drug addict or an alcoholic. Dustin Hoffman is not a drug addict, an alcoholic. These are people that are really, really fine artists. And there's a lot of examples in the acting business today of people who are very straight, very hardworking people and don't derange their senses. Now, for the parts that I play and for the kind of things that I ended up doing, I guess I got my just desserts. Would I have been able to play Frank Booth the way I played it in Blue Velvet? Probably not. As a matter of fact, David Lynch, who never was an alcoholic or a drug addict, who wrote it, he wrote the thing as helium that I was snorting. you know?
That gas mask.
The gas mask is helium. So, like, you know, I went to him and I said, David, he had helium there. Helium doesn't make you crazy and derange your senses, it just makes you sound like Daffy Duck, you know? So I would do this stuff, and I said, David, I'm listening to my voice. That's all I hear. I said, let me think of it like an amyl nitrate or a nitric oxide or something that deranged my senses. And he said, what are those? And I said, they're drugs. Let me just show you what it would look like.
Oh, look at that. Oh, what are these? Don't say please, kid.
And I do the sense memory, and I show him what it looks like. He says, oh, that's great. Do that. And I said, then if you want to dub this voice in later, we can do it later. But right now, I can't, I just can't, you know, do it. Okay. So he said, great. And he encouraged that. But like, you know, and only till recently did I think, wouldn't it have been interesting? Now, I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't abused drugs and so on, that kind of approach to it. But wouldn't it have been interesting, the way he wrote it, how scary Frank Booth would have been if he was a guy who just became Daffy Duck and said all those lines, that kind of sinister, just voice.
Mm-hmm.
What a bizarre guy that is. So anyway, I'm just saying.
There would have been very different ways to achieve something equally frightening or affecting.
Right. But like, you know, so I wouldn't have probably ever come up with these other things. But you have people who get, or I can talk about Hoosiers and playing the alcoholic. I wouldn't have had that to draw on. But there are people who play, look at Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man, you know? He went and researched it. I mean, there's a thing of researching it. You don't have to become, what's the, I don't know what that disease is called that the man has in Rain Man.
He's autistic.
Yeah, autistic, yeah. You don't have to be autistic. Obviously, he couldn't have been to like do the performance, but you can go and research these things. You can research drug addicts or what the effects of drugs, and you can research this stuff, and you don't have to become one.
Okay, that answers the question.
I mean, it's
which is
still kind of doesn't, I guess, in a way, because you know it's not like the way that it was originally written. But
I'm wondering, because Dennis Hopper, he's old Hollywood. I think because he said he had a drug problem. I'm wondering if his drug addiction started way back when he did Rebel Without a Cause with James Dean and Natalie Wood, because they did him and Natalie got into a really bad car accident. So I'm thinking that's probably where it stems. So he was battling drug addiction for a pretty long time.
Yeah, well, he was famous. Like, it kind of is something that dogged him to the point where he couldn't really get work. Like he was just he's a famous drug addict. And it became increasingly hard to work with, I think, to the point where people are like, we don't want to have him in movies like with our directors anymore, because it's gonna go so over budget. It's gonna, you know, it's just gonna be fucked up. Like, you know, so David Lynch didn't even want to cast him in this, and he lobbied hard for it. Was like, I think that I'm the right person to do this as someone that used to be an addict. And there's like a David Lynch story where he's talking about how hard he pushed for it. But like, it's an amazing performance. Like, I think even if you thought that every single thing in this movie was terrible, and like you can't deny that performance, I think, is like, you know, kind of the golden standard of evil.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
It was very good. I just have to point out, though, there is, if he's doing whippets, now that's what he said, he's doing whippets. At the very first time we are introduced to Frank, his voice gets higher. That does not happen to you when you do whippets. You have the scariest, lowest voice in the world. So
they gotta get the drug use correct. You know what I'm saying?
Canceling
Like,
this movie for inaccuracies. You know, 40 years later.
Too many. That's what I'm saying. If you're gonna do the whippets, you got to have the right side effects from the whippets.
It's like being on ecstasy and not getting really, really, really thirsty.
Or touchy feely.
This comes out the same year as Little Shop of Horrors too, with Steve Martin as the dentist that is sucking down the nitrous oxide the entire movie.
Yep.
And, so it's interesting that those are both kind of the same year. You know, because Little Shop of Horrors is obviously a stage play that was, you know, came out a long before like the movie did, but still.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Because I don't want to jump in different places. Like I'm
No,
gonna let you lead.
no, you totally go ahead. I was trying to think of where I wanted to take this conversation next. So,
well, for me, I mean, the most jarring scene, of course, was the rape scene, but that was a pretty big scene, so I didn't want to like skip ahead if you wanted to get to other stuff first.
no, let's talk about it.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah, look, this is a personal thing. This has like really no bearing on whether the movie was good or bad, right? But that scene was really, really difficult to watch. Like I struggled to get through it. My body tensed up. I was watching with my husband, and I think after that scene was over, he looked at me and he's like, "Do you like it? Like, do you like the movie so far?" And I was like, "I don't know, it's okay." And then he's like, "I hate this movie. I can't stand it." So I was like, "Oh, good, I feel better." Right? But like for me, it was like a lot of things were happening for me psychologically as I was watching that scene, right? First off, it's a difficult scene to watch. So you're already kind of like, for people like me, I guess you're kind of struggling through that. But also, like, you want to understand as it's happening, like what the point of that scene is. And there's a lot going on. Like there's the actual rape itself, but then there's also, you know, there's Jeffrey Beaumont's character, or Jeffrey Beaumont, that's the character's name, played by Kyle MacLachlan. He's hiding in the closet and he's watching it go down. And you're like wondering the entire time, like, what is he thinking? Does this change anything? Like, is he going to save her? Like, I don't know. It was just like, after the scene was over, I was left wondering what was the point of that scene? Like, what were they trying to convey? Right. And again, it didn't really make any sense until I read about the point of the movie in reviews later. And I think that's a problem.
yeah, I mean, it also follows after the scene where, you know, she finds him in the closet and kind of starts kind of doing the sadomasochistic thing to him and threatening him with a knife, and then like she gets turned on throughout their thing, and then, you know, starts to like, you know, gets on her knees, and then like this whole thing is happening, and that those emotions I think are already incredibly conflicted when you're watching that, right? Like it's, you know, you're watching something because you don't really understand, like, all right, like it seems like he was trying to solve the mystery that, you know, of the ear, but then all of a sudden he kind of turns into this weird like voyeuristic character that's kind of like enjoying watching her get undressed, and then he gets caught, and then she seems like she's threatening him, but then also seems like she gets turned on. So you're watching all of these conflicting things, and then enter for the first time, you know, Dennis Hopper's Frank character, which is, you know, a whole nother level of like, you know, you're watching like a small little bit of sadomasochism, and then you're given like a, you know, full dose of that rape scene. And
yeah, and one other thing, let me just note, because like this was the thing that really stood out to me. Like there were these constant tight shots of her face as she was being abused, right? But the tight shots made it seem like she liked it. Like, do you get what I'm saying? Like she had this look of like, almost like this look of lust on her face. So I was like, okay, wait, hold on. Let me try to understand. Like, did she just get raped? Or is this like a weird kink? Like, you know, no kink shaming, but like, is this a kink and she's in on it and it wasn't actually rape? Like, I was just so distracted by the billions of questions I had. And I just wanted it to be clear that this is a rape. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. And or at the very least, I think like a director and like a writer director that has more of a nuanced and like psychologically apt take on, you know, the many conflicting things that happen through sadomasochism and through like relationships like this that are so abusive and toxic and scary and evil. And like, so I don't think that David Lynch necessarily is the person that can go that deeply into like the psychology of it throughout this movie, because he's like, oh, let's throw in a bunch of weird symbols, and then I'm going to try this thing and this thing, which, you know, is great. Like it's a great thing in a lot of David Lynch's movies, but at the same time, it's not the thing you want when the movie is kind of surrounding a psychological, like a very deep psychological wound that you're trying to kind of explore and see the, you know, no pun intended, I guess, because I'm still scarred by the brain sticking out of the cop's head at the end, but you know, it's like
I feel like Jeffrey being in the closet and watching wasn't confusing for me, because right before he went in, Sandy asked, "Are you a detective or are you a pervert?" And he says something like, that's for me to know and for you to find out. And in that moment, I was like, this man's motivations are confusing. And because before that I was like, oh, he's just interested, he wants to be a detective, and in that moment I was like, okay, some other shit is going on. And I feel like the joke there is that he doesn't know, or like that's the deeper thing there, is he doesn't know what his motivations are. He doesn't know if he's a pervert or a detective. And it takes him the entire film to sort of figure that one out. But it was hard, that scene, I agree, was very difficult to watch. I feel like the close-ups of her appearing to enjoy it or find some sort of enjoyment in it speaks to her. I mean, I think that her husband was abusive to her as well. I feel like that's sort of evident throughout the movie, because she refers to Jeffrey as Don, that's her husband's name, and asks him to hit her in a way that it seems like, okay, this is something that she has had Don has done to her. And like I assumed that Don was in with Frank in this shady business, this drug dealing business, like murder business that they're doing, and did something wrong and is now in trouble with Frank, and that's how he ended up where he is, but like was not a good husband to oh my god, I'm sorry, I can't remember her name, the character.
Dorothy,
yeah, was not like because when she talks on the phone, she's never like interested in talking to her husband. She wants to talk to her kid. Like it doesn't seem like she's very motivated to be reunited with her husband. More so her child.
The happy ending even kind of like the husband's dead, but she doesn't seem to care about that part of it.
Yeah. So Rayyvana, what you're saying right now, like it helps me connect so many dots, right? Because you're right about that. You're right about her referring to her abuser by her husband's name. And that was one of the other things I was having a difficult time kind of reconciling. The fact that in the very end, like she's so happy because she's finally reunited with her son, but her husband's dead. So I was like, are they going to address the fact that her husband's dead? Like, how does she feel about that? But no, really great observations. You're right about that.
I mean, I have no idea whether or not I'm right, because anytime David Lynch is asked what he was trying to do with the movie, he just refuses to answer like a Sigma male. Like thinking of the interview.
He doesn't know.
Yeah, the interview where they're like, will you elaborate on that? And he's like, no.
Yeah, like when it comes to like assault in movies, I always feel like there needs to be like some type of motivation for the character, or like something has to come out of it. Otherwise, it's just like pure shock value. Like in films like I Spit on Your Grave, which 75% of that movie is a rape scene. Like that's something that you cannot it's hard to stomach. So like when that scene came on in Blue Velvet, I was like, oh my god. But then again, I'm like, is she enjoying it? What's happening here?
Yeah.
I'm like, it's a David Lynch film. What am I saying?
Which once again is something that I think a director that's more psychologically engaged, I guess, and like thinking about this from a purely psychological standpoint would probably have something to say about the way that sadomasochism kind of changes your brain, and that the not purposeful attraction, but still the attraction to violence that she has, and all of these kind of deeper psychological concepts that like I don't think that David Lynch is just the right person to necessarily tell that story. At the same time, though, I think it's interesting that the Kyle MacLachlan character kind of is David Lynch, kind of bumbling his way through this entire mystery without any kind of deft hand in it, without any kind of really understanding, and things just keep on kind of happening to him as he goes further and further into this world. I think that that's kind of a masterful thing, that it's almost like a self-awareness that I don't know
He
if
even got scarred as a child. Like David Lynch, he saw like a naked woman walking down the street and he cried and broke down. That for like forever scarred him. So that was like the inspiration for that one scene where she's nude, and I'm like, God damn, David Lynch, what was your life like? Because he pulls all these different inspirations in his work, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, and what? Dorothy's named after a character from Wizard of Oz, so it makes things even stranger that way too.
If I could switch gears for a second, I would just like to talk about the opening sequence of the film. And like in my mind, that's like a perfect opening sequence. I think it is fantastic. The way that it starts out just with the blue velvet, and then you're seeing this beautiful, perfect, seemingly perfect town, and it's just getting like more and more focused until you're seeing the bugs crawling over each other on it below the dirt, like foreshadowing that this Lumberton is not some perfect town. There are some disgusting and horrific happenings just below the surface, and Jeffrey reveals those by just a tiny bit of digging. I liked it a lot. I don't know. The colors are also fantastic.
It tells a story without really having any like words or dialogue in it, right? Like because it's showing the town, and then the father is spraying, like, using the hose, and then he has his stroke, or assumably like that's what they never really go into what actually, like,
Well, I thought the hose was a bit of a metaphor too, the way it got like crimped up, and the same thing happened with his heart. It was like, because David Lynch likes to show lots of different like opposites at the same time, or telling the same story with different stuff. It's it makes things more surreal whenever he does it. Because there's and Anna, I'm just curious about what your thoughts on the dream logic that pervade through the film, because I always thought that's one of I always think Lynch's work is not necessarily good or bad, but it's like it's fascinating. It's like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like you don't enjoy it, but like it gets something done. But like I haven't heard you address the dream logic yet, and I know I want to make sure I get that in before you leave.
Yeah, no, I that was more of what kind of confused me about the film, because like as that was kind of like woven into the film throughout, it made me question, like, okay, so how much of this is real, how much of this is a dream? Also, like, the film wants to weigh in on very serious real life issues. But then at the same time, there are elements of the film that are kind of like supernatural or not realistic. I think the scene with the, guy with, got shot, clearly like his brain is like hanging out of his head, but he's standing upright while he's dead. Right. So I was like, is this real? Like, is this supposed to be happening in real life, or is someone dreaming it?
Well, he seemed like he had gotten like almost lobotomized. Like he had, and they alluded to it earlier when she was talking about her son, and she's like, they did something to his brain, they injured his brain. They alluded to, later on the cop's fate, where he was going to have the same thing happen. So I think he's lobotomized to the point where he really can't do anything, and he's on his way out. Like, he's wounded, but he's not dead yet, which is, I don't know how you achieve
figure that out. Like, how do you figure that out watching that film? Like, I guess that's my problem. Don't get me wrong. Like, I don't want to be served everything because I'm a moron, right? Like, but I like symbolism. That's why I really enjoyed The Shining, because everything just kind of made sense. By the time the film was over, everything made sense. Whereas with this, thank you for mentioning the lobotomized child, because they never revisited that. Like,
and the child seems fine at the end. The child seems fine.
She's talking about her husband, not the child. They have the same name. Her husband was shot in the head in her apartment.
All right. See, I didn't get that from.
That's what I assumed.
She doesn't seem to have any other concern for her husband at any point.
Welcome to David Lynch films, guys. This is fun.
Yeah.
David Lynch walked so that Darren Aronofsky, Wes Anderson, and Noah Hawley could run.
It's funny because this is one of his least confusing films.
That's so funny. It's so funny. And look, I also think I should be clear in that there's a difference between being entertained with a film and liking a film. I was entertained throughout, right? But I don't want to be spoon-fed what the whole meaning of the film is, but I want it to at least be easy to interpret. And I just had difficulty interpreting what the point of certain things were, or what things were supposed to mean. And I shouldn't have to read about the film afterwards to understand what the objective was. That was my big issue with it. But overall, I was entertained throughout. I was uncomfortable as well throughout, which is a good thing. You want films to evoke various emotions and all that stuff. So I respect that. I just think I almost felt like it was being too artsy and confusing for art's sake. And it's like, we got it. We get what you're trying to do. It's just like, just try to explain things a little bit better, you know?
I think that's the note I'm going to bring Conan in on, because I know that he's been kind of chomping at the bit with our,
Don't be mad at me, Conan.
Counterpoint to the last 45 minutes, Blue Velvet is actually awesome. Thank you. That's all we have time for, folks.
Good night.
No, I think this is a very interesting conversation. I think a lot of these points hammers home why I actually was not so crazy about it first time I saw it. And I've seen it probably a dozen times at this point. And as time has gone on, it sort of unfolded to me that some things that really bother me to begin with also kind of bother me, but in a different way. Like, it's sort of like, oh, that bothers me. And like, hey, I can't wait to see this crazy ass thing that's going to happen next. And that's sort of like me as a David Lynch. I mean, I got a Eraserhead picture right there, right? Obviously I like David Lynch, but the man is not perfect. Like, Rabbids is amazing and practically unwatchable. Frankly, from my perspective. I mean, I almost wore my Audrey Horne shirt to this, but I thought I would actually dress up more like Dean Stockwell's character, which I think, is not that much different than how I actually normally dress up on this show.
No, it's not. You should have done a little bit of makeup though, and done the JFK look.
I have the same kind of the hanging light that he sings into. I actually have that exact same hanging light thing, and I was going to do a whole anyway, but then I was just like, oh my god. So it's like, I am now the comment section come to life, and I apologize to the very awesome ladies on the panel. I think you're all very neat girls. So but I was saying in the comments, like, I have a hard time with the rape stuff too, and I think it's bad. Like, it's not like a good thing, but I think it was important. What he was trying to get across, the monstrousness had to get through. I wish he had another way to put that forward. I think just not just the violence, but the implied violence of Dennis Hopper's character was like plenty. But I get it. Like, he wanted to show that it wasn't like a victim-victimizer situation. There were shades of gray, which is why I used to despise when it's like the whole Kyle MacLachlan, like, oh, what's he doing? He's, being a scumbag. That sucks. Then it was sort of like, no, it's shades of gray. This is suburbia, right?
More than 50. I would say more than 50. I would say maybe 150 shades of gray.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I wasn't thinking about those movies, but like and Kristina earlier referenced one of my favorite scenes from it, which is the when Isabella Rossellini, the amazing Isabella Rossellini, who's fantastic, is wandering naked through this suburban kind of idyllic 1950s style Lumberton. And that is coming off a real experience that David Lynch had, where he's a guy that takes images. He takes images and he stores that somewhere in his weird old subconscious, and that like bubbles up and becomes like primary characters and becomes entertainment. And for me, you have to be down for the ride for that. And I am completely down for the ride. And again, I say this to someone that, as much as I love Blue Velvet now, didn't love it at first. I thought it was like mid-tier Lynch, right? I'm Twin Peaks ride or die. Like I could go through the whole thing, but like things like I have your disease in me now. Like, that's a heavy line.
Yeah.
Like, that's like, that tells you like where he's, and it's like stuff's decaying under the surface of this suburban idyllic lifestyle, and I think that's something that he excels when he has that sort of, it's like, hey, everybody, the 50s were cool, but also here's all this rotten stuff that was going on underneath. And that's what Blue Velvet is. It's actually his first foray into that, which I think he mastered with Twin Peaks. But again, counterpoint, Blue Velvet's actually awesome.
Yeah. No, Conan, you just made such a great point, because, I mean, Isabella Rossellini's character is also a really great symbol for what you're talking about, because she's this beautiful performer, right? She's this singer at this club, and she's singing this beautiful song, incredible voice. And for someone who doesn't know what she's going through, all you see is that beauty, that perfection. But under the surface, she's experiencing such deep trauma and abuse and pain. So just her role as a singer is a great symbol for what you're talking about. You're right. Yeah. And who knows, maybe
palpable. It's like you can feel it. You're just
and
like
the song. Blue Velvet is like a perfect description of what her character is going through. You know, if you really pay attention to the lyrics, I still see Blue Velvet through my tears. It's clear, you know, it's almost like, you know, on the outside, everything is fine and beautiful, but on the inside, things are just crumbling. And
there's also I think beauty. There's beauty in pain, which is you know, kind of a crazy notion, I guess, to put into a song that's really on the nose like Blue Velvet, but like, you know, there's kind of beauty in this pain, like literally like the blue velvet you know, piece of the dress that he's carrying around with him is like something from her, as much as, you know, the disease is something from Kyle's, you know what I mean, like his character, like he's carrying this around with him, and it's something of beauty, but at the same time there's so much pain behind it. And Isabella Rossellini's character is the same thing. Like she's beautiful and she's kind of radiant on stage, maybe not the best singer, but you know, otherwise
she really had to practice. I think like they didn't think that she was going to pull it off, but I think she practiced and practiced and practiced, like with like a trainer or something like that. Like
they didn't have auto-tune back then, you know.
They sure did. That story that Kristina's talking about is actually incredible, because it also sparked what actually worked was her doing the arrangement with Angelo Badalamenti, who Lynch is the first time he ever worked with him, and that started like a decades-long partnership that stands to this day. And he actually said that if it wasn't for the interpretation of that song, he doesn't feel like the movie is going to be, because he's like, you know, I feel everything. I'm David Lynch. I've got weird hair, and he's not wrong, but because like that movie, you know,
he's not wrong. His hair is weird.
His hair is weird. But
so where's the weather reports?
I love his weather reports. I listen to them every day. I don't live in LA. I don't need them, but
you don't need
it's nice to say good morning, David Lynch. I'm glad that the weather's good there.
but the song, and especially that version of the song, it's such an underlying theme throughout the whole movie. And then Forrest, we've talked many times, because of course, maybe you didn't notice the guitars in the back. I'm a musician, but like, music can be so important and tie a film together, but it also can rip it apart if it's used poorly. And this is a perfect example of a song used so well that
Hans Zimmer. No needle drops to be found in this film.
Right. Exactly. And I think that's where it bears mentioning, and not the least of which is that I think I'm a big Badalamenti fan. I love all of the stuff that those dudes do together. I think that it's a rare example of like two brilliant artists going to bring out the best of each other. And I think that this is the first example of that. So it's sort of like year zero, if you will. And that's a Batman reference for Andrew.
And it's also the second collaboration between Kyle MacLachlan and David Lynch, which I mean, obviously we watched Dune for that one episode, the first Dune, and you know, didn't seem like necessarily. So it kind of feels like this is the first fully realized use of Kyle MacLachlan that he has,
and it's also the first absolute batshit love scene that Kyle MacLachlan's involved in, where somebody's just going completely off the, because like.
There's a theme to
him
and Jesse from Saved by the Bell just like watched Blue Velvet and goes, "That's what I'm gonna do. That's how I'm gonna orgasm."
So Anna, did Conan say anything to, you know, transform your opinion on Blue Velvet at all?
Well, okay. So the thing that I'm encouraged by is that he didn't like the film the first time he saw it, and so I do want to rewatch the film like with this, I guess, better informed lens, because there have been a bunch of movies that I ended up loving, but the first time I watched it I was not a fan of, so it's somewhat likely that I might appreciate it a lot more upon watching it the second time. But for me, the thing that really stood out was the example of ugliness beneath the surface of like extreme beauty, because I did notice that theme throughout the film, and that's a powerful message. And I think that's a powerful message that resonates with everyone on different levels, right? We all know what that's like in various parts of our lives. I mean, I know what that's like based on how people perceive what I do for work and what it's really like doing the work I do, right? It's like on the outside, it's like so glamorous and so awesome. On the inside, it's fucking torture sometimes, you know? So
we got you though. You know that.
yeah, I know. You guys are amazing.
It's hard to be a neoliberal CIA apologist establishment shill.
Paid by Soros and all those.
I was gonna try to work in a joke about Beatles coming out of Madeleine Albright. Like
That's good too. That's fine. If I may, and that I don't want to hijack the show, but I guess it's kind of what I do. Can we just talk about how goddamn brilliant the late great Dean Stockwell's character is? Because he is not on screen that much, but what's one of the things you remember about Blue Velvet? Oh yeah, he was singing that Roy Orbison song, and like this crazy whack Dennis Hopper character who is scared of nothing. He's an insane person. He's the most wild card of wild cards, and he is deferential to the Dean Stockwell character. So what is that guy like? Why is like what's his story? And we don't even know, because and all the affectations are all Dean Stockwell being like, I'm gonna take this and do this with it. And Dave Lynch is like, great, keep doing that. And you have like a young Jack Nance. You have Chucky. What's his name? That's what I remember from
Brad.
Brad. Yes. Yeah. Like the gang, and everyone's like, oh, we're going over to, you know where we're going. Oh man. And then it's just to see him so this wild madcap, like cartoon villain character just become like almost his sidekick. Right? That's crazy. And he's doing this like drag show practically.
Yeah.
And this quiet charisma too. Like you know, let's just not forget how charismatic Dean Stockwell. Never seen him as charismatic. And I've watched Quantum Leap, and I've watched Battlestar Galactica.
We just watched Paris, Texas. Yeah, last week, and that's like his other biggest.
He's never been this charismatic on anything, even on his appearances on Enterprise.
It's like, so I know it's not good to make an Alec Baldwin reference, but Glenn Ross, he's barely in that movie, but love it or loathe it, it's a memorable freaking like 5 minutes or whatever it is. And in that same way, it's like Dean Stockwell defines this movie in a way that like no one can understand that character, but all they have to understand is his relationship to Frank, which is
I have a clip that of Dean Stockwell finally. I mean, as a character actor, obviously being in things for, I think he was in 7 decades of movies pretty much without like really retiring. I think
he was a child actor, right?
Yeah.
He started. That's why he always looked out for other child actors, because he knew like what a tough thing it was to be a kid and be acting. So he looked out for them, which is cool as shit.
So he finally gets to go on David Letterman after this movie comes out, and after he gets his Oscar nomination, and David Letterman starts asking him a bunch of questions about Blue Velvet. So I found this and I wanted to play it.
Dean Stockwell. Dean Stockwell was his name.
I have to ask you about the scene in Blue Velvet. This was without a doubt. Now, I'm no movie expert, but without a doubt, one of the strangest things I'd ever seen on film under any circumstances. What exactly were you? What was the character? What were you doing? And
I don't know what I was doing. I was going along just out of my imagination. I knew that there was a character in there that Dennis Hopper played. Remember Frank?
Right. We remember Frank, who was breathing out of a tank most of the time.
And he was.
Frank needed professional help. Is it safe to say that?
That's what was in the thing. Yeah. He was obviously one of the blackest, irredeemable characters in recent history of movies. Yeah. And yet, in the middle of the film, he meets this guy that he looks up to and thinks is suave. So, you know,
you were Frank's mentor.
That's right.
Oh my God!
So I had to be pretty weird.
Yeah.
Right? And I put the pill in his mouth. So I just thought of the most bizarre character I could come up with, and if it wasn't bizarre enough.
But what was the little? What was the? And I guess for people who have not seen the film, this is meaningless. But perhaps they'll rent it now and hunt up the scene. But what was that little thing? That little clubhouse you ran there? What exactly was that?
You know, nobody knows. That was Ben's place, and don't go there.
Yeah, and I'll get off this in a second. But this scene really kind of made a dent on
You
my.
really liked this movie, David.
I did.
didn't
I
you?
enjoyed the film, but I was really taken by this one scene. And if, unless I'm mistaken, you were kind of singing into a trouble light.
Yes. It was Dennis came up with that. He found it over on the side. No one knows where that came from.
Well, it was very peculiar, and congratulations on a fine piece of work.
For being peculiar.
Yeah,
Thank
no.
you.
Oh gosh.
It's actually really interesting. The rest of his appearance is about how he's doing work for the Democrats under I don't think it was Mondale. I think it was what's the I don't even remember the next Democratic
Dukakis. Dukakis.
Yeah, I think it was one.
Don't blame it on Dean.
No, but it was one of the two. But obviously, even David Letterman doesn't want to talk about that part of his activism and the help he's giving to the Democratic Party. He's just like, let's talk about this movie, Blue Velvet.
We got to talk about Frank. Like, what's Ben got on him? Can I just, Forrest? I would love to know what the ladies individually think of the Ben character, because I think the Ben character is just worth. We could have a whole show about the Ben character, right? But
yeah. The Ben character, I mean, clearly even Dean Stockwell doesn't know what the point or what the purpose of that character was. So I feel a little vindicated in noting that I just since I couldn't figure it out, I immediately forgot that scene. Until you brought it up right now, it's like, oh yeah, what is the relationship with, Ben, which is Rockwell's character, and Dennis Hopper's character? And I don't know what it is. And maybe it's just one of those things that's kind of like, oh, well, we leave it to you to interpret it any way you want. But it is fascinating that Frank Booth is such a violent character who carried out violence, not just, against Rossellini's character, Dorothy Valens, but also toward other men in that scene, but did not carry out that violence against Ben. So I don't know what to make of it. Maybe Ben had some sort of power over him. It seems like Frank Booth was enamored by performers, but when it came to a female performer, he thinks, giving into my carnal desires is totally fine, but he's not gonna rape Ben, right? So I don't know. Maybe that's what it is. I have no idea.
So the way I saw their relationship, so when Dorothy first discovers Jeffrey, the man in her closet, she initially starts to, treat him the way that she's being treated by Frank. So I saw that relationship between Frank and Ben. Ben is the person who has this power over Frank that scares him, but intrigues him. So he then in turn, tries to have power over other people like Jeffrey and Dorothy. And it is, psychosexual, but, and you clearly see, at the end of the song, he says, let's go fuck or something like that. He's clearly attracted to him in a way that he can't, but I don't even think it's that he's afraid to exhibit that behavior, because he puts on lipstick and kisses Jeffrey right afterwards. I just think he doesn't have the power to do so in that relationship. So I sort of viewed it the same way that Dorothy originally treats Jeffrey, and you are taking your frustration out of this power imbalance on someone who you view lower than you on the totem pole, as it were.
Yeah, I think we need a prequel at
Just
this point.
Ben?
He does make an
Young Ben?
impact, but that's just the
The Young
power
Ben
of
Chronicles.
yeah, there we go.
That's just the power of Roy Orbison or whatever, the
Oh,
country stylings.
Exactly. Both. I agree with both Anna and Rayyvana. It's you don't understand the purpose of Ben, but Dean, man, he just knocks it out of the park with what he's given. That shows you just how talented he is.
He's like a
he's
vampire.
willing to do anything.
Yeah. Well, it's
like a
big vampire
vampire.
energy for sure.
Yeah, like the way his lips are very, very pursed and red. I just expecting him to like smile at the end of the song and have these fangs, and it'd just be like, you know, From Dusk Till Dawn, and all of a sudden you're in a vampire movie.
Yeah.
I think that. Well, I just briefly think that also when you see somebody like the Frank character that's evil to the point where like it's like unhinged evil that, you know, is almost hard to take, like how, you know, because you can't understand any of his actions. He's, you know, hopped up on the fucking like gas the entire time, the like nitrous oxide or whatever, like he's, you know what I mean? So he's running around. You can't, there's no high, like you can't really tell why he's doing any of the things he's doing. And I think that it's important sometimes for storytellers to show that like he's not the source of evil. Evil's already existed. And in some ways, I think having him have a mentor that kind of presumably added to that evil, or probably did traumatize him in some way, probably did expose him to something, like, you know what I mean? Like expose him to maybe not the disease, but expose him to something, you know what I mean? At the heart of this, to turn that person the way they are, or at least to help turn that person the way they are. It's almost like, you know, you want to make sure that people know that like the arch villain of a movie isn't necessarily the only villain that's out there at the center of this town.
And I think that I like Anna, I thought that was a great point, that ironically, as a performer, it never occurred to me that Frank's attracted to performers. It's just that manifests very differently between Isabel Rossellini and Dean Stockwell. And I think that that's a key part to understanding who this dude is, right? Like he thinks of himself as some kind of like, you know, freaking Al Capone type figure, like plus Elvis or something, right? Like in his own mind, he's a legend in his own mind this way. And I think that's very interesting because like, what I also will say is that like of the many times I watch this, if you do watch it again, I'm not saying you will or not, if you're like me, you will be like, oh shit, Dean Stockwell scene's about to come up. Let's go. Like you get stoked for it. You're like, all right, I can't wait to see how freaking weird and awesome this is going to be. This is going to be great.
And what you just said sparked a memory that I wanted to bring up, because one of the other, like, I guess, subplots, if you want to call it that, was the similarities between Jeffrey and Frank, right? Because there was that scene where Jeffrey, you know, ends up hitting Rossellini's character. And then that also made me think about the similarities between the two in watching Rossellini's character perform. They had very similar facial expressions, right? Like you have Jeffrey and Frank both watching her perform, and they like seem enamored by her. And so that's why I bring up that there seems to be some sort of admiration that Frank has toward performers. But you're right, it manifests in different ways depending on who we're talking about. In the case of Dorothy Valens, it manifests in an incredibly violent, awful way. And with Dean Stockwell's character, it seems like he just has this admiration, almost to the point where Dean Stockwell's character has like some sort of power over him. But that I would like to have seen that explored a little more in the film.
He is the drug supplier, right? And he, yeah, so he definitely has that over him.
Yeah.
He's the
Sorry, Rayyvana, I didn't mean to talk over you.
He's got the candy colored, you know, that they call it the Sandman. You know what I mean? He's got them, and he's, you know,
which that's a boomer thing to like take a song and like that, and that's the drug. Okay, we get it. It's drugs. It's not that clever.
It's also, I mean, it's interesting though. There's that one
drugs. Who knew? Oh, I'm from the 1930s.
You see him dose Frank's character and literally put the pill on his tongue. They're like in like a very I think almost sexual, almost like sexual way,
like a priest too, like almost, you know, like a sexual priest, and you know, Dennis Hopper's like a
giving him communion.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, sometimes getting high is like going to church, so I get it.
Take me to church.
I think I played with sexual priests at the Berkeley Square in 1999. But anyway, go ahead.
But Anna, you said you had a heart out at 11.
I do, unfortunately, but this was great, and I really, really enjoyed doing it. So thank you for having me. And it was freaking awesome to do something with Kristina and Rayyvana specifically. Like it's been, you know, I know the two of them well, like from the content that they create. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
it's always
pleasure to
great
meet
to meet
you,
your idols.
All right, love you guys. Have a great show.
Bye.
Bye.
Be a neighbor.
All right. We have Karthik joining us.
The stream would be too powerful with Karthik and Anna. The audience couldn't handle it.
I don't think there was enough space on the screen. That's why.
Everyone's gonna need a second monitor.
Yeah.
Can I introduce a topic that we have not discussed yet?
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Sandy, you know, watching the film, Jeffrey is to her what Dorothy is to Jeffrey. Bringing her into this, you know, despite her dad being a cop, she has no connection to this, you know, other world that exists within Lumberton. He is being, you know, introduced to it through Dorothy. She's being introduced to it through him. And I found it really interesting because she said, you know, there was like a bright light and like the robins came and all that bullshit that she said about her dream. And like she very much viewed Jeffrey to be that person, but that's juxtaposed by the fact that he's bringing her into the you know, the darkness of Lumberton. I thought it was like very well her character, despite, you know, you could write her off as just like a side character, is very well, you know, crafted into the narrative of the light and the dark within the film.
I think she's a super important character. I mean, I think she's the key to understanding the movie to a lot of ways, because otherwise you just have a noir, and I love noir.
It's
right?
Noir-vember, by the way.
Yes. Everybody, yes. I don't know how. Happy Noir-vember to those who celebrate.
Better than No Nut November.
Yes, agreed.
Well, the 1940s noir, it's No Nut November, so you know.
Yeah.
Well, and let's be clear, as much as you know, from first viewing, like maybe it doesn't seem like Laura Dern's character has a lot to work with. I think she does an amazing job of providing a presence for like what is ostensibly, as mentioned, like, you know, a similar-ish relationship between Jeffrey and Isabella Rossellini's character Dorothy, but also like it's the light and the dark, right? And it's like I don't feel like it's subtle, you know.
Yeah.
Like I feel like it's pretty overt, but I think
like,
Laura Dern
yeah, like Isabella's like, you know, dark beauty, you know, dark hair, and you know,
blonde,
like Laura
brunette.
Dern is blonde, and it's like, you know,
yeah, I mean,
I just think it's interesting that Jeffrey is, you know, he is the gray, but when you're comparing him to Sandy, he is the dark side, and he's like the gateway into the dark side. Now I'm like thinking about the ear and how it was very important that it be a whole, like an opening into the mind, and he's like that for her into like this. I think I referred to it as this before, the seedy underbelly of Lumberton. I don't know. I just think that like relationally, like every person has like an interesting, like to Dorothy, Frank is the dark side versus her light side. And like every character, and to Frank, Ben is the dark side to his, like every single character has another character that, and I mean, I'm sure if we explored it further, Ben probably has a worse Ben 2, if you will.
I can't imagine.
His doorway into the dark
I can't
side.
imagine who Ben's mentor is throughout this. He's just like,
where's that movie?
But yeah, I 100% agree with that.
I think there's a question of
Ben's
like
opposite would be probably like you know, an actual like Dracula.
It's Joe Pesci in JFK. That's what we're supposed to take away.
I think I say Joe Pesci in Casino, but go ahead. Yeah.
Why don't we do it, My Cousin Vinny? By the way,
We should. I'm down. I'm down to do that. I've watched that movie too many times.
Found an ear on the ground.
Utes. 2 Utes.
Did you say Utes? Anyway,
That's
right.
that's the Rittenhouse trial judge. The monsters.
Too soon, bro. Too soon.
I was gonna ask, like, on the question of Sandy. I think, like, and I don't know if this was extensively discussed. I didn't get to see too much of the show before coming on, but maybe I should have like tuned in.
Johnny Big Time over here. Oh yeah, I was too busy. All right.
No, I was actually asleep. I had an alarm up. This is actually past my bedtime, so you know I had to sleep and wake up, nap and wake up for this. But I just thought that and again, like I guess like this is kind of almost timely because I'm asking something that's topical. When you're talking about David Lynch, you're talking about like dream narratives, and it's often one of the characters who is on the screen who is dreaming. So in this, like, I wonder if to answer your question and with a question, like, is Sandy the one who's dreaming the whole story, or like, you know, which of the characters is the story like a dream of? Is it Jeffrey, or is it his nightmare, or is it like you know, is it Sandy's dream, because she's talking about the Robins anyway?
The end feels like it's Sandy's dream, right? Like the light changes, it's like really bright, and you see the Robin, and the Robin looks really fake, and like the you know, the grandma, I guess Jeffrey's grandma or aunt or whatever she's supposed to be on the family relationship chart, is like, wow, I've never seen a Robin do that. Which, all right, land, but whatever. But you know what I mean? So that part felt like a dream to me more than the rest of the movie, because all of the plot lines seem to be, you know, come together nicely, and they've kind of put you, it feels like they put you, like David Lynch realizes that he's put you through this incredibly sadomasochistic story and really like throwing a lot at you, and he's like, I'm gonna give you a happy ending as a treat. But then even this happy ending,
the
feels
first
like
time he's ever done that. The first and the last.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and he's like, not for me, not gonna do that again.
But more like, I guess, like,
and it looks like
the linearity of the narrative kind of like, I think, comes with Blue Velvet, which you don't get in any of I mean, practically any other David Lynch movie, I think. Like, so that kind of is one of the reasons why, like, it sounds like it's one of the characters' dreams rather than many characters' dreams, because other movies you kind of don't know you know, which character is dreaming. There are multiple characters that could be like having interlocking dreams, just why, like, I always felt like it was kind of dumb that Christopher Nolan kind of did Inception and thought that he was like a genius, you know, as if he was the first person who came up with the idea of dreams within a dream or something like that. Like, David Lynch has been doing that for like 30 years, 40 years.
Yeah, that's why I say that, like, David Lynch walks so that, like, Wes Anderson and Noah Hawley and Darren Aronofsky could run. Because, I mean, Legion is basically, if David Lynch got a hold of like a comic and was able to do his own like comic show, Legion on FX by Noah Hawley would have been the result, because it's all about dreams. You don't know what reality you're in. So I remember when I watched Legion, I was like, are you sure this is a Noah Hawley? I'm like, this reeks of like David Lynch, in my opinion. Everything about it, music, aesthetics, everything.
I never got into Legion as much as Fargo. Fargo is like he was coming up with, like, so he was filming Fargo at the same exact time that he was doing Legion, and I
still recommend Legion.
So let's shut Andrew out of the conversation because it's about comics. So let's not let him talk. But, Kristina, let me just one up and say that Legion's awesome, and I saw Legion before I saw Fargo, and I think Legion is actually the best of the X-verse adaptations. Yep. You don't need to know anything about any of that to enjoy Legion, and that's one of the things that makes it interesting.
Oh yeah, I cosplay as Lenny in Chapter 6, so it's all good.
But Legion was created by Bill Sienkiewicz, who has this amazing art style, and he's actually a big fan of David Lynch. And when Dune came out, Bill Sienkiewicz did the comic book adaptation. So in a way, like, it's almost like, you're seeing David Lynch in it, but that's because David Lynch is within Bill Sienkiewicz's almost dreamlike work at times. So
it's almost like a
big
tribute.
surprise that you're making that. Yeah, you're seeing, the influence being pulled out of it.
One of the aspects of dreams is also the fact that, like, aside from, not knowing who's dreaming, it's like the characters get mixed up. So I guess, like, that's one of the reasons why a lot of the characters tend to, kind of behave like each other. And there are times when, like, I guess, like, a classic scene, which I don't know to what length you went into, is the scene between Jeff and Frank, when Frank puts on the lipstick and, like, he's assaulting him. It kind of, like, is reminiscent of Frank's interactions with Dorothy, as well as later Jeff's interactions with Dorothy as well. Like, and they all have, like, that, both of those dimensions, and, like, they're kind of, when it happens each time, it feels like they're repeating themselves, but also when this scene happens, it's jarring, and like you kind of realize that like essentially there's similar interactions or the same interactions, or they can be mirrored against each other.
So there's a line that I stole for a song that is history doesn't repeat itself, but sometimes it rhymes. And I think of Dennis Hopper's character and Kyle MacLachlan's character. They're rhyming, and how does that turn out? Well,
yeah, I mean, Frank says, I'm going to put a bullet in your head. That's like my love letter to you. Does that happen? No. Jeffrey puts the bullet into Frank's head. That was his love letter to him. There's so many like the whole film is very mirrored. Like we were talking about the relationships that people have with one another, mirroring the relationships they have with their respective abuser or the person who's like bringing them to the dark side of Lumberton. But I mean, even in that way, it's like so many things that you expect to happen one way just are flipped, like him shooting Frank instead of Frank shooting him. I don't know. I just really loved this movie. I love it. I think it's fucking fantastic. Great film. I've seen it 3 times now. I don't know, but every time I've enjoyed it more.
I think like with since you're talking about, and again like this I guess brings it back to Sandy. I have a question of like how much of the characters in Blue Velvet are actually just archetypes, and what are the archetypes for? And like I think you brought up the abuser and the victim archetype, and like basically they all like switch roles at least to an extent. And another archetype that kind of comes into the picture, like I feel like it's the Dorothy Valance character, and Sandy are kind of almost the opposite of what used to be the kind of standard for women in a kind of way in the 60s and so on, which is kind of the era that it's throwing back to, which is that like Dorothy Valance would be more of the Madeline character, and the Sandy would be more of the Jackie character, but like the blonde one is the Jackie character, and the Madeline character is Dorothy, who's the dark-haired one. So it's kind of like an inversion of that as well, the two archetypes.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that there's an interesting thing with what I was saying earlier about like villainy and showing that like Frank isn't the only villain. I think in the same way that like Sandy like kind of just living this normal Lumberton life, like she's kind of our I guess she's kind of our eyes into what that normal life looks like. So
suburban,
like
so Sandra Dee type of character in a way.
She's going to high school, and everyone at the high school is like, wow, a guy with a car, that's he's gonna pick you up, he's so handsome, like just this whole like normal boring life that is on the surface, and she really is the surface character. And then it feels like each character kind of goes deeper, right? Like into that like sadomasochistic evil cesspool of a town that actually exists under the surface. But then throughout the movie, like the only way that Sandy really sees that part of it is through Kyle MacLachlan's character, who is pulling her into, or trying to kind of entice her into that.
I just like the idea of like like you have like the nice clean cut, and then like the femme fatale type of character. It's always the blonde, the pure innocent one, and the brunette is the one that's is seductive and mysterious and
but it's the other way around, right? Like isn't it the other way around usually in like movie history itself? Like the Noah character, the blonde one will always be the devious one, and it's kind of like seen as a sign of promiscuity and all of that. But in this case, like the square is the blonde one, and the one that's promiscuous, or like the one that's questionable is the dark-haired one, which I think was like a kind of inversion that suggests, like, I feel like a kind of, I don't know what is it an inversion only, or is there like a subversion going on, and is this like a sign of the subversion that the movie is doing?
I think it also has to do with like the post like noir like era, like because in the 50s at least a lot of like Hollywood was changing, so they would portray like the blondes as the clean cut goody two shoes, and the brunettes would be more dark, mysterious, and even psychotic at some points. So it was really all about how the evolution of Hollywood was, because the 1950s was like the clean suburban, rebel, like conservative, go up, rock and roll was not really a thing until like the late 50s. So there was a bit of like a post noir era of Hollywood that was like bubblegum clean. So, and I guess Blue Velvet kind of portrays that.
It's neo-noir, right? Like it's an attempt to take back the aesthetic stylings of the golden age of Hollywood's version of noir, and which in itself is kind of this darkness that kind of overwhelms everything, and this feeling for the first time that like our institutions are failing, which is really where this pop cultural influence on that is really where the noir genre comes from. You know what I mean? Like the reason that they rely on detectives so much, private detectives, are like Seamuses, as they as they're titled in a lot of the pulp novels. Like the reason that they trust those detectives is because the police force has failed, but like much in the way that you can't really in a lot of places like show like the government failing. The Hays Code wouldn't let you show the government failing, so you had to have somebody that was government adjacent to kind of save the day, but also showing that like the police were useless, and like the institutions in the town were useless. People were corrupt. Like that kind of comes through in this later era, but like now you can kind of have people have sex and you don't have to imply as many things, and you know what I mean? Like it's not like, so it's this taking back of that genre. I think in a form that in some cases at least in a form that that like more that in a form I guess that fully realizes it in that sense.
And I just want to address to Matt Gilbert real quickly, as long as it's a Pabst Blue bourbon.
I'm so Rayyvana, I think you got a point. I'm going to tag that in a second.
Okay. I just wanted to say, like, that was a perfect segue into something that like I wanted to discuss was David Lynch's obsession with the good cop. He does have an obsession with the good cop, and we see it, I mean, in Twin Peaks, they're all good cops, right? They're all good cops, but here you have the corrupt police officer, but he's we see at the very end of the film the police are already engaging in a sting operation against Frank and against it wasn't news to them about this corrupt police officer, and you can kind of read it on, I can't remember his name, but the detective, what's Wilson?
The yellow man.
Betty's dad is when he's shown the pictures of the his partner, he doesn't seem surprised to see him there, and he doesn't like make any sort of like, he doesn't have a reaction to seeing him there, and it sort of like lays the groundwork for this operation that has already been, the groundwork's already being laid to get Frank, and it seems like he already has this, the police force at large already knows that this is going down. They are the good cops, he is the one corrupt cop, versus sort of I mean, as leftists we have ideas of all cops are bastards, all cops are bad, and I don't know, and I mean I try not to like look too much into David Lynch's politics, because by and large they suck nuts. He has good opinions, but like his politics are sort of like, this is how I feel, I'm a crazy person, I'll vote however I want.
Yeah, like he has like no real like ideology.
He falls into like the populist mentality, I think, rather than like any kind of overt like leftist. Like we need to kind of, I mean, the kind of like the misreading almost of like heighten the contradictions, which, you know what I mean? Like we need to disrupt like the status quo in any way possible. Like I remember him saying, "Oh well, Donald Trump's saying some interesting things," but he wasn't endorsing him. But like it's this kind of But I feel like this filmmaking kind of is the same way. Like it's like this obsession with like the little guy rising up. This obsession with like the good cop. This town is falling apart, and it's like it's rotting out from the inside. But he can't quite like there still has to be a good cop, and there still has to be someone that actually wants to solve the murder. Like it's not, this darkness kind of doesn't pervade everything. Like there has to be some like logic to it almost.
That's a through line through a lot of his stuff too, is the fact that and I would put it less. I think it would be simplistic to call it like a cop fetish or like savior complex. Not that anyone here was doing that, but like the important thing is like to show the darkness in all its void like terror, but then show that there's always light. That's absolutely the David Lynch jam, and whether he gets it or not. All right, but that's like what he's trying to do, even for something like Eraserhead, which is basically the most the most crazed parable for like unwanted pregnancies I think I've ever seen in my entire life. And I say that as a fan, but having nothing to do with literally any of that, since we've had a lot of beer comments in the comments section, I want to talk about the usage of beer brands in Blue Velvet, specifically things like, there's I'm going to let someone else take the quote. You don't need to hear it from me. But also like Laura Dern's dad. Well, he drinks Budweiser. And that's a signifier, right?
Which is a really weird moment, by the way, when Kyle MacLachlan's like, the king of beers, and seems so disappointed that she hasn't had a Heineken. Like,
yeah, because at the time Heineken was like what beer snobs drank, which is why Dennis Hopper's character gets so fucking worked up about it. And like, basically, I don't know about y'all, but like, every house party I ever went to, any like after party, after show or whatever, anytime somebody would say Heineken, there'd be some wit that goes Heineken, and then they would do the line. I'm not gonna do it. We all know the line. Come on, you don't need me to do this. But it's like, to me, that's like one step above Austin Powers.
It seems like you really want to do this. It seems like you really want to take the line.
I really don't. But
I don't know. It just seems like you want to take the line.
But Heineken was I'm not going to do it for us. I'm sorry. The Heineken was like considered like a more like upper class, like upper class beer at the time. Whereas PBR is the working man's beer, right? And then all of these like people that like all this cheap, crappy beer that tastes like turpentine after you have the first one, they all have their little camps that they're in. There's the Budweiser camp, there's the PBR camp, there's like Hams, there's Ole in the Pacific Northwest. And it's all terrible. And it's all like, closer to urine than beer, frankly. But like everyone has opinions about it. And it's like this kind of analog for, the brand identity as social stratification. And in some cases, class. And I think that that's something that I never thought about that when I saw this at 17. But I definitely think about it now.
How much of the stratification is like just class as well as like intergenerational is another thing that I wanted to like point out, because clearly there's like violence being passed down, between people, and like there's definitely two tiers of characters. There's the younger ones, and then there's the older ones, and stuff like that. So that's also another factor that I thought I'd throw in.
Are Karthik and I the only ones going to talk about this beer thing? I think it's pretty interesting.
No, I think it's interesting, and it connects them. It connects.
Let's have a show, Karthik. Just you and me. We'll do it.
So sorry, I was just reading the comments.
Don't like beer.
Comments are dude. I'm sitting here drinking like a mid-grade Pinot Noir, like the fancy lad that I am.
Pinot Noir.
Well, it's also, but it's a way of connecting to the brand identity of class, but also to like the small town element of it, right? Like everybody it's relatable. Like everybody has a beer brand that they like, but at the same time, it kind of because it's alcohol and because it's associated with so many like trouble in general. You know what I mean? Like it kind of allows it to keep that like seedy underbelly style of connection without without really like exploring something that maybe would be relatable but wouldn't take you down that rabbit hole. Like everybody drinks beer, but at the same time, like excessive drinking obviously can lead you down the path of your brain like basically rotting out. Like so it's kind of this it's kind of the same kind of duality, and like the whole idea of like prohibition kind of and the moral panic behind drinking and alcohol, and you know what I mean. So it kind of still creates that it allows it to keep it allows it to make that connection while still retaining the seedy underbelly style, I think.
And if I may just real quick to tag that, like I think it's fascinating that the Frank character, like Kyle MacLachlan's character, is just trying to like get through, right? He's just trying to survive the night, and he thinks it's a relatively innocuous question. I don't know. I guess I'll have a Heineken. And like the overreaction is like classic Frank. And like, no, you were in a dangerous place. Like you thought that was like a nothing question. Like even that even was laden with all kinds of traps for you, and you fell into it by answering and by existing.
Yeah, and to that end, as long as we're talking about this sequence of events, I think that David Lynch does a fantastic job of portraying an experience I think a lot of people have had, which is the night that you never expected to happen in your life. I very much related to this because there have been, I grew up in a very working class neighborhood. I have a lot of friends that are involved in sus-ass shit. There were many nights where I was like, how the fuck did I end up in this situation? How did I end up here? And watching that sequence, I so felt like Jeffrey in that moment. I was like, I have done this. Not this exact thing, not this exact sequence of events, of
Deja
course.
vu-ish.
But like, I have been at a Buddhist temple party where people ended up shooting up into the air and lying to the monks, telling them that it was fireworks. I was at a house party where the host's father was on life support in one of the bedrooms, and his male nurse came in, blasted out of his mind with a gun, screaming at everybody. And it just so much related to that moment where you're like, how the fuck did I get here? Like, is this it? Is this going to be the end of the road for me at this absolutely absurd, ridiculous moment in time? Is this how it ends? Like, it just, I don't know. Very, very much I related to that moment. And I just think that he portrayed it in a way, like, of course it's absurd, but we've all found ourselves in situations that felt very absurd and found ourselves in positions where we thought, I shouldn't be here. And like, it was just very relatable. I loved that sequence of events.
I can relate. I was in New York City on New Year's Eve, and I'm like, why did I come here today? I'm like, is this it? Like, is this going to be it? I'm only 13. I'm just here to see a Broadway show. But there are cops telling me to go in dark alleys and avoid, big crowds. And I'm like, I'm just trying to get to like Penn Station.
Well, it's like the darkest, most surreal version of like After Hours or something, right? Which is a brilliant movie as well. But yeah, like there's not that many movies that can adequately have captured that sense of adventure, but also that sense of imminent danger. Like not just danger, imminent danger. Like this could go south like in like the next 10 seconds.
I feel like you're describing, what I've always thought, and I please pardon me if you've already discussed this. What I've always thought was kind of like the kind of core of Blue Velvet, which was a kid who living through the nightmare of watching his parents have sex, and kind of like watching it from within the closet. And I mean, I shout out obviously to Slavoj Žižek for like inspiring this line of thought through his movie. Kind of like if once he stays for the show, it gets weirder, and I guess that's kind of where that nightmare goes. Like I feel like that's kind of Jeffrey's Alice, going through the rabbit hole of watching his parental figures kind of like enact the Oedipal complex like right before his eyes, and then what happens after that, and that's kind of like a fascinating line of interpretation, because like then you get to like wonder what's actually happening, who are these people, and like why are they giving him these kind of weird nightmares. So this kind of like ties back to whose dream is it, and like the question of whether this is Jeffrey's nightmare becoming Sandy's dream. I guess like that's a kind of way to look at this narrative.
There's also a weird dialectic of he's simultaneously both daddy and the baby, like the Frank character. So he's jumping in between these two things as like this child kind of that's like that's subservient, I guess, to her as a mother figure, and then taking control as like the daddy figure and being the dominant one. And it's like this weird, but it's every other line, which obviously makes sense when he's indulging in all kinds of nitrous oxide stuff, right into his face and going more and more crazy. But like it seems like he's almost like I made a Zizek joke on Twitter earlier when I was like talking about the dialectic and how, like holding those two identities and truths in your mind at the same time, like of like both the baby and the daddy. But it still is. It's this like it's this really, really crazy switch off that happens, and it's very Freudian, I think, like in a lot of ways. Like this movie, kind of.
They even touched even one of the bigger themes or whatever is like, oh, the Oedipus complex. We all know about the Oedipus and the Electra complexes is where it's all I think it's sex and aggression were the two main things. Sigmund Freud said that controlled like your life, which I'm like, I'm more of an Eric Erickson type of gal, but the whole idea of like a young child lusting after the parent and wanting to be like the role of the opposite of the other the parent that they're like wanting to be or whatever, I'm like, it's just all about attention. It's all about favorite parents. Like, it's nothing sexual. Like, Sigmund Freud, just snort some more cocaine, please.
Well, the other I think interesting thing to Karthik's point too is that the one character that kind of remains grounded in like the Lumberton world of things kind of being seemingly nice is Sandy, and we see both of her parents in multiple scenes. We kind of understand that her father, like, she never really has this like father complex throughout the entire movie. Everybody else really does have some form of that, and we never really see Kyle MacLachlan's parents. I mean, you see like the mom and the grandma or whatever sitting there. We never really engage with those characters. Besides that, like one scene or whatever, we never see, obviously we never see Dorothy's whatever. The only other is the kid, and we don't even see the kid. So it's like the only way that kind of Sandy remains tethered, I guess, fully, is that we see both of her parents, and her parents are like taking an interest, but everyone else has like these weird Oedipal issues that yeah.
I mean, speaking of Oedipal complex and like wanting attention, I feel like maybe this has a lot to do with the age I was when I watched Blue Velvet and all that. Like I think I was like 15 or something, and then I was simultaneously watching the Spider-Man movies with Tobey Maguire, and I couldn't help but like see the kind of similarities between Peter Parker and Kyle MacLachlan's character. And like to be honest, like I think that like they have an almost parallel narrative. Like I feel like they go through the same arc, except that like Kyle MacLachlan's becoming Spider-Man involves like an actual confrontation with the darker side of like him, like confronting the fact that like his Uncle Ben is actually like the Frank character, not a goody two shoes Uncle Ben, but like somebody who's leading him down a more darker path, and like he's got to like resist that rather than like fall into it. But like I feel like the desires are kind of similar.
Would Uncle Ben Frank say with great power comes no responsibility?
Yeah. Also,
exactly. Yeah.
Did we all watch the new trailer, by the way?
So we saying that Dennis Hopper is the libertarian version of Uncle Ben.
Libertarian make age of consent. I will say, like, as long as we're talking about like Oedipal complexes, that is definitely something that David Lynch has a fascination with. I mean, we see it in Twin Peaks overtly. Like that is, I've never seen a film that has more overt like relation to that or a series than Twin Peaks, and we see it here.
Well,
it touches on it, but literally like
is the only other like
yeah. But I mean, in Twin Peaks, she's raped by her father, and seemingly has a strong, to some extent, consensual relationship with, a demon that is possessed by her father. But I mean, it is like an interesting aspect of David Lynch, because he has this fascination with psychosexual relationships, despite being, and I described him before as this, and I will again, a literal Boy Scout, a troop leader. Like this man won't swear. Like I was listening to an interview with Dennis Hopper.
Fine.
Yeah, I was listening to an interview with Dennis Hopper where he's like talking about how David Lynch was telling him how to say the word fuck, but refused to say it. Like this man is like straight edge, but and that's like this aspect of voyeurism that we see in Jeffrey. He loves to look in. David Lynch loves to look in on this, but will not participate in it. And I think that it comes across in a lot of his films and different projects, but like here, so explicitly, you see David Lynch in the Jeffrey character. And I mean, he has a fascination with Kyle MacLachlan as an actor. He like creates relationships with actors and loves to envision them in the roles that he creates. But here he really sees himself in Kyle MacLachlan and in the Jeffrey character, and writes that character, you know, into my, you know, view. We don't know because he refuses to answer questions about this, but like, you know, is creating this character in the way that he is creating the film as an outsider looking in.
Yeah, no, 100%. I got that feeling throughout the entire movie too. And interestingly, I think you know, the fact that Jeffrey as a character is in over his head the entire movie, like to the point where it's like he doesn't really like, there's not really a point in him being in it besides kind of to be like the you know, the savior detective person and to get us further into this. But the story kind of like might have ended the same way, even if with somebody else killing Frank, like even if there was no Kyle MacLachlan character. And it feels like David Lynch is kind of inserting himself into it the same way, like writing a screenplay about like, you know, sadomasochism and like you know, just as evil and all this stuff. Like, has David Lynch felt like he's delved into something that he doesn't quite understand and gone too far deep into it, and just like there's no turning around from that.
To your point of you know, the unwillingness to swear, I feel like that's something that you touched on, something pretty fantastic. I feel like because the Frank character swears like pretty much every other time, and it's almost like he doesn't even know how to swear or something. It's like a kid swearing. And what is interesting is like this sounds like it was written by somebody who doesn't know how to swearing. And the second thing about that was that like kind of the importance of Frank's character, because every time he has to take that drug in order for him to like, you know, feel that desire, it comes through because like it almost seems like David Lynch wants to portray through Kyle MacLachlan's character that like he sees the person that he's, and this is what like I guess touches on the idea of intergenerational, what you're inheriting from the boomer generation, so to say, is like that impotence. And David Lynch seems to suggest through Kyle MacLachlan's character that like, you know, you're some sort of like Gen X, I don't know, nihilism towards that. I don't know if Kyle MacLachlan's character would be like Gen X or would be actually the boomer. I don't know exactly what the intergenerational handover here is, but it seems
the
like
early side Gen X, I think, if I may, as
right.
a generational expert.
I feel like it suggests like the younger generation is seeing the older.
Dave Rubin called himself in that one clip where he
Gen expert.
Yeah.
let me retract that statement. Then I don't want to be associated with that.
Oh man,
but yeah, just to finish,
we're dunking on Dave Rubin.
Just to finish that thought, I feel like the younger character sees the older character as a sort of person that he's not supposed to emulate, as opposed to that he should emulate. And I guess like that explains also the fact that he doesn't want to swear, because he sees the older character as like this complete clown slash like violent person who takes a drug and swears and like has no control over himself. And maybe a character who doesn't swear feels like that's a form of self-control.
He's all id. Yeah. Frank is all id. Period. Thank you.
Which is no, but like is a similar thing also, I think, to the idea of and then Rayyvana, I'll ask you your final thoughts when I guess finish this thought. But it's the same thing with the, you know, with Frank's character kind of demanding the bourbon. I think it's kind of this weird relationship to like the father figure, like 100%, like and like a kid almost looking up at the father figure and seeing them cursing and seeing them drinking and seeing them taking drugs and really losing control. And like and then you know, Kyle MacLachlan losing control himself and hitting Dorothy, and then the flames like, you know, rearing up behind him. It seems like he's kind of following down that same path, and I think that inherently that is a father-son dynamic, right? Like that is in the same way that his own dynamic with the Dean Stockwell character is kind of following on that same track too. But Rayyvana, your final thoughts for 11:40.
Sorry. Yeah, apologies. I do have to run. But final thoughts. I didn't get to talk about this, but I feel very strongly that David Lynch does an amazing job at capturing the innocuous and integrating that into his films, because there are scenes where it's like, we all know that this stuff is going on, but you know, not everyone in this world does. Like the people who work at the Beaumont shop with him, the blind man and the person who is like his assistant, you know, Jeffrey's character is doing things that are like scary to him and like horrifying, and he's engaged in these sort of like illicit activities, and they are just yucking it up over there, like laughing, and like, and that is very real. You know, when you're going through something as a person, not everyone in your life knows that, and you have to continue to exist in the world. And these things are happening, and you see it again with when he goes to pick up Sandy and her boyfriend catches them. Like, to the boyfriend, that's the worst thing in the world, but to all of us, we're like, shut the fuck up, Mike. There's a million other things going on.
Yeah,
why are you letting this get to you?
That part of it was like my favorite part of the whole movie. I think one of them is like when the guy comes out to fight him, and like you're just like, listen, like compared to like Frank or something, like Kyle MacLachlan's gotten the shit beat out of him so many times in this movie. Like you're speaking the shit out of him, isn't gonna do anything. Like,
yeah, it's just like fantastic. I don't know. I very much, I love the film. I think that David Lynch is my favorite producer. I love him. I'm fascinated by him, particularly by the way that he refuses to answer questions about his works. I think that he is the prototypical Sigma male. Will not he just like ducks and dives any sort of question about it. And we'll always say the films exist. You watch them, figure out what's going on, interpret what's going on. There's no outside context that is necessary for my films. I'm not going to provide that outside context. I just think that he is such an interesting character, and always sort of writes himself into his projects in a very relatable way. But yeah, this film is fantastic. It's difficult to watch. The first time through, everyone is like, oh yeah, this man's gonna die. Like, if you know anything about David Lynch, you're like, there's no universe in which he doesn't die at the end. He will die. So like having this like dream-like ending where everyone is happy is just like such a subversion of what you expect from David Lynch. From start to finish, opening to closing sequence, one of my favorite films I've ever seen. I love it. All right, those are my final thoughts.
all right, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful. All right, have a good rest of your show.
Bye.
Do you guys want to get to the
I knew I was going to be friends with her, by the way. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
No.
Well, I was going to say
get it.
how many similarities between this movie and Black Swan, surprisingly, there are.
Which I think we're gonna maybe cover on this particular show.
Yeah,
I'd like to, because I haven't seen Black Swan. Like I've seen.
Literally my favorite movie of all time.
Yeah, that's why some smart fella decided we should do it on the show, right? So
yes, who is that guy?
I don't know. Give him a raise.
Or pay him at all? No.
Well, that's the joke, right?
No. So I'm so introducing this segment, I guess, as we keep doing. This is our Letterboxd one-liner reviews. Conan finds a few of these. I guess there's 5, which last night I think there was 10.
It was Roadhouse, of course there was 10.
Yeah, but so these are just one-liner reviews from Letterboxd that are just either funny or poignant or something, or written by David Lynch. No, but
worth mentioning. Of course, Letterboxd is a social media site for film lovers. Movie Night Extravaganza is on it. Follow Movie Night Extravaganza was basically for us. You can follow me as well. Andrew's on there. It's great. It's a place to discuss films, make jokes about film. You can also use it to log things you want to see as well as things you have seen. It's a great resource. They aren't paying us anything, but I was
going to say sponsor us.
This is free, but they could. This is free content. I love seeing what the masses come up with. This is talk about bottom up democracy. This is bottom up film reviewing. So
which is like one of the most gatekept professions. Otherwise,
fucking ain't right. All right, here we go. Dean Stockwell could have punched me in the stomach like he did with Kyle MacLachlan any day. Sydney there.
All right, number 2.
Dennis Hopper's breathing is scarier than Vader's. Pat Harris.
and in that trailer, trailer, I think, right? Like at the beginning, we watched the trailer where it was just him breathing heavily into the entire time. That was like incredibly disorienting.
Scary AF. I back that. Well, mark me down as scared and horny. Kyle MacLachlan, probably. Tarantino with that particular bon mot.
There's a clip that I had pulled that we didn't get to watch, but it's him. Kyle MacLachlan is like talking about how this movie is erotic, and he's like, it's an extremely erotic movie.
Yeah.
If you say so. That David Lynch is such a visionary. He made a movie about an ear from Reservoir Dogs 6 years before it just got cut off. Hunter Strawberry.
Wow, and only 3.5 stars still. Like this was someone who's a soothsayer, man. Like someone who actually came up with stuff that came in the future.
Some reviewers on Letterboxd are hard asses. Like, and I've actually gone back. I've realized I've become more of a softie as I've used the site more. Like, there's movies I love. I'm like, wow, 3.5, really? Like, I love this film. But anyway, then I'm like, Free Guy, 5 stars, quintessential home from college movie, Taylor Williams. I think I gave it 4 stars. Anyway.
You forget very fast that he's home from college and like that's his connection to, you know what I mean, like being back in this world, and you forget about the dad because like you see the dad,
dry-eyed, bushy-tailed.
To the
Letterboxd,
point of
place for film, follow the show. We need to get a wrap going on this. Like we've done like 7 times. You should probably get like a thing for it. Anyway, sorry, Karthik, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize that you were still doing the bit. But I just like wanted to say, it seems like to the point of eroticism, I feel like this movie is, if anything, explicitly anti-erotic, and that actually I wish like Rayyvana was here, because I think to the point of like, I think David Lynch being goody two shoes Boy Scout, I feel like he almost comes across as like sexually kind of like conservative in a sort of way, that he's got like a lot more fears than desires as far as like sexuality is concerned, and every time that it's portrayed, it's almost like a nightmare scenario in his movies. And it's kind of like I guess like Kyle going through this experience, Jeffrey is kind of like a part of the reckoning, that it's like he's actually afraid of it rather than someone who's embracing his sexuality or embracing his desire.
He seems to want to do like missionary, like, you know what I mean, like just kind of like
missionary,
and then it seems like he's getting pulled deeper and deeper into like the sadomasochistic side of it. Even to the point where she kind of provokes him into hitting her, like, you know what I mean, which is something that like he obviously doesn't want to, and then he's drawn into doing that, and like with like, it's no longer from a place of just like sexuality, it's from a place of like actual annoyance and anger at that point, which is why I think the thing flares up behind him, and the tie-in between that anger and which would be, I guess, an interesting psychological question if somebody asked David Lynch about it, like is some of his Boy Scoutness a fear of whatever's going on inside of his head that allows him to come up with this stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Because like, if he's like
fear of female desire, I feel like, and I think, or like at least a desire that he doesn't like identify with, or something like that. Because I think the whole
which
point
is a common noir thing, by the way. There's a lot of fear of female desire.
Yeah, David Lynch didn't invent that. Let's be real.
Yeah, I invented that. Anyway,
give him credit, goddammit.
Yeah, so I guess going into this into the final thoughts, because I do want to try to keep it up at the consecutive viewers, so we can hopefully get affiliate from this last couple of days of these.
Get the nubbies, people. That's why I host you guys on my channel, so you can get some more attention.
Yeah. So I guess starting with Karthik, because he was the last to come on. Final thoughts.
Oh wow. So I guess like it's hard to sum any David Lynch movie up in like any kind of like narrative that you can like easily get away with. But in the case of Blue Velvet, I feel like this is the closest that you ever get to a straightforward David Lynch movie, if you can ever call it that. And I think that like essentially it is. When I was a kid watching it, I think I should probably have not watched it as a kid, like at 15. But I did like watch it subsequently a little bit later as well. But I always remembered, being as, I guess like it's a little bit silly to admit this at this point, but like as enamored with Isabella Rossellini's character as like the Kyle MacLachlan character was, and having exactly the same experience that he had, and like going through the horror of like, at that age, I feel like I kind of was also I didn't have any obviously any actual experience with any sort of desire being fulfilled, let alone being able to go through the kind of nightmare scenario that Kyle MacLachlan goes through. But I felt like that's how it would have felt to go through something like that. And at that time, I remember like identifying with the fears and the desires. But I think now that I'm like looking back on it, I wonder if the desires and the fears are actually a more intergenerational kind of handover that is happening in basically the context of like suburbia and what the Gen X is inheriting from the boomers, and like basically how it wants to see itself, like what its senses of optimism and all of that are. And I feel like the kind of optimism coming through the Sandy character rather than the Jeff character kind of fits for me. And I guess like that's why I would, if I were to summarize this movie, I would think that it starts off as like Jeff's nightmare and it becomes Sandy's dream. And I think like I kind of said it earlier, and I think that's a nice way of looking at it. And in a way, Sandy's dream is to involve Jeff in her life. And that's kind of like, I feel like a way in which maybe David Lynch also sees as a sort of journey of his kind of, existential crisis.
Yeah. Yeah, good final thoughts. I don't have really much to add to that. Kristina, final thoughts?
I'm a David Lynch aficionado. I love his films, and Blue Velvet's probably like my favorite film of his. I mean, I just love everything about it. I love the aesthetics. I love the pacing, even the plot. I mean, there's a few things that I'm like, little triggering, but I mean, I just love how he thought Blue Velvet. I want a movie titled Blue Velvet, and he created something from that. Even if it's a painful childhood memory of seeing a woman naked. But
maybe
yeah.
want Blue Velvet. That's what
Yeah, like I should have worn Blue Velvet. I did not think of having. I mean, I'm having my lounge singer arc happening right now because I feel like I would make a decent one. But yeah, I mean, this movie showed that Isabella Rossellini could be more than just a model. She's a serious actress, and her parents, their talent definitely rubbed off on her. This is definitely like more collabs between Kyle and David, as we've seen like in Twin Peaks. This movie kind of also helped revitalize Dennis Hopper's career in a way. So like 10 out of 10.
All right, Conan.
Well, one-upping on Kristina's point, which with our outfits, we should clearly take the show on the road, right? But anyway, I would also like to say that I pointed out earlier that also the music is so important in this movie, and it's one of the ones that it makes the movie. And it's so important also that the version of Blue Velvet that's played, that was the first collab with Badalamenti. And again, I said it before, I'll say it again, is a decades-long collaboration. And all of these things we think of, like, the absolutely somehow rated exactly right and underrated too, Twin Peaks, is due to Blue Velvet. Blue Velvet walks so Twin Peaks could run, right? And there's a lot of connecting threads that happens with Blue Velvet, that even if it was a bad movie, which it isn't, as we've established when I came in, Blue Velvet is actually awesome. It would stand the test of time as inspiration. And the one caveat I want to say is the straight story is definitely a more straightforward Lynch film than Blue Velvet. That's all I'm going to say from earlier. And I was Jeremy holding on that. I was like, but make sure to say that. Make sure to say the thing earlier on. But I think it's incredible that, like, look at how eminently quotable it is, but how weird it is. Like, with all these like different characters that are like nightmares and dreams, and it's all put together. It's light and dark. It's not noir, but it kind of is, but it also kind of isn't. And it's part of like the new modern, it wouldn't be new anymore, American cinema, that like there couldn't have been, a lot of Hal Hartley. There couldn't have been there certainly could have been a lot of well, I could name some names, but point of fact is that like it was very it brought forth a lot of stuff, both good and bad. I think Blue Velvet, as I said, didn't love it when I first saw it. Every time I see it, I kind of like it a little more. And it's a harsh take. Like there are scenes that are hard to take, really hard to take. Like I'm someone that like I there has been rape in almost every woman in my life's life before. Like that's real. That is real, and it sucks. But it also, I'm not. I'm gonna say it's okay. It's not okay for me to say that, but like. It's a choice. It's a choice, and it's in there, and it's not just in there to be there, which I think is different from some movies that have it as like, really, that's the motivation. Okay.
I Spit on Your Grave, for instance.
I wasn't gonna name names, but you mentioned it earlier. Yeah.
And then Showgirls. We just had a very long conversation about that with Showgirls when we talked about it with Gavin, with Kenzo.
So last two things I'm going to quote because I'm the music guy here. That I'm going to quote two bands. One is the Butthole Surfers, which is that the line that opens the song. It's better to regret the things in life that you have done than the things you haven't. I think about Blue Velvet a lot when I think of that line. And the other one will be The Residents, which is that pain and pleasure are the twins that slightly out of focus spin around us until we finally understand that everything that gives us pleasure also gives us pain to measure it by.
Deep. And
you create a snap. That's what we do in poetry readings. It's okay.
Yeah.
I think you guys are doing it. Wow.
I feel like I'm back at the old DSA meeting. Anyway.
Yeah.
Andy?
I think most everybody kind of hit some of my closing thoughts. I did want to just point out a high point of David Lynch and Antonio. I'm sorry, I'm not going to get his name right. I'm going to try Badalamenti. Is Julie Cruz's cover of Elvis's classic song "Summer Kisses, Winter Dreams" from the. I would have to say just like of their collaborations, I think that is their best. But I'm going to end this my closing thoughts much like David Lynch probably would. Back in college, we decided to have a party, but we were all broke and we only had one can of Pabst Blue Ribbon. And we passed the Pabst Blue Ribbon around, and everybody thought it was the most disgusting drink we've ever had. And every single time we'd take a sip, we'd be like, "Let me have that shitty drink again," and drink it and be like, "Oh, it tastes like piss." And there's my closing thoughts.
And that's
Pabst Blue Ribbon is not very appetizing. I like just the name of it even like sends a thing of my throat. But two closing thoughts for me. First of all, Heineken, fuck that shit. Pabst Blue Ribbon. That's the first one. And the second one, I like the line, "Stay alive, baby. Do it for Van Gogh." So with that, I'm gonna say, stay alive out there. We'll be back tomorrow for Dune, and that's gonna be a nice conversation because we're back with Gene, and we have I think Jeremy coming and Renee. Like we have a whole cast of characters tomorrow to talk about.
70,000 people on that one too.
Yeah. All right. Peace out, everybody.